Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. Once again, we are waking up with watches, and everything you are about to see is for sale. Names, references, and when available prices in the description below, and reach out to tmosso at thewatchbox.com to buy any of these watches or inquire about price. We are also buying Sell Me a Watch because we're stocking up for the holiday season, paying our highest prices of the year. One watch or a full collection with no upper limit on value paid. Once again, reach out to me at tmosso at thewatchbox.com if you're interested in selling. Let's start with a big piece. Well, figuratively speaking, because the Lange und Söhne Lange 1 in white gold with integrated bracelet is a shockingly grand take on the classical 38.5mm Lange 1. This early 2000s model features an extraordinary integrated bracelet that transforms the look and the feel of this watch while leaving its essential stately character intact. 38.5mm, you can see that the real change here isn't in the case, it's in the lugs. It's no broader across than the conventional watch would be with standard lugs, but it has a different feel, a more massive heft, and I would say a more imposing stance on the wrist. Throw it on my wrist, 16 centimeters in circumference, and you can see the watch appears broader, even though in fact it is not so. It's certainly more robust, both in feel and in look. One could say it's a bit more butch. It is absolutely impressive. Eyes closed, you know something special is sitting on your wrist. It has both mass and class. The bracelet is uncommon. These welded lug integrated bracelet case junctions were featured on a number of Lange models, but they didn't get a whole lot of play because of the price involved compared to, say, just getting the watch on a strap. The mesh bracelet is extraordinary with the feel of silk, as the individual links are small and, as you can see, hollow through their centers, meaning it really does feel more like a piece of supple fabric than chainmail on the wrist. You can see each individual link hand polished with the outer face is satinated, and the case, everything you would expect of Lange with the welded junction, a full integration of the bracelet. This is a watch that proves that Lange knows how to do a handsome integrated bracelet, Odysseus. And this is a rare watch. If you consider yourself a connoisseur of Lange, a lover of German watches, or simply an enthusiast of the rare and exceptional, you need to consider this watch. You can see even the buckle itself has been hand engraved, with the scalloped components of the buckle actually echoing the cross-section of the individual links. Now, it is a white gold blue dial Lange 1 at heart. It's still the same movement. It is still the same case size, even if the lugs have changed. And you get the same caliber L901. L901, the first Lange movement, work started in 1990. Three-quarter style plate, you can see German silver bridges, nickel copper zinc with the copper giving it its golden hue. Fired blued screws holding golden chaton and pivot jewels, pocket watch style inside the three-quarter bridge, glasuta stripes, a freehand engraved balance cock, black polished case clamp screws, swan's neck regulator, and capped the escape wheel, 5-position chronometer style adjustment, 3-day power reserve, twin mainspring barrels. You've got the double-digit panorama dot on the dial side. Let's see if we're through the date change danger zone. It has a stop second function. It also has a quick set system for the panorama datum and a power reserve indicator on the dial with a blue metallic dial base. I should mention the dial is made of sterling silver and it is then galvanized this blue tone. An extraordinary watch, front or back. I suppose I should come up with a German name for this, but you can see it also features gorgeous anglage on the edge of every bridge, as well as on the edges of the access ports that are used for maintenance. Now, maybe that's not your Lange. Maybe you want to pare down even a bit more or go more traditional, and in that case, the 1815 40mm in yellow gold is your watch. Launched in 2009 and made through 2013, it is a simple three-hand dress watch par excellence. Blue alpha-style hands, a silver-white dial, likewise made in sterling silver and then galvanized to the silver-white. It has a simple and strong yellow-gold case with a domed and polished bezel and a satin-finished mid-case for contrast. Throw this on my 16-centimeter circumference wrist and you get a good sense of how it wears. I pull my sleeve back a little bit so you can better see that I have plenty of clearance on both sides of my wrist to wear this watch. So even if your wrist is about 13.5 centimeters circumference, this is still a winner for you. A bit larger than previous 1815s, it strikes a more modern stance on the wrist without being outsized or oversized in any regard. Caliber L51 on the reverse side. Like the Lange 1, the L511 is beautifully made with mirrored ungulage on the edge of the bridges, engine turning on the base plate, the freehand engraved balance bridge, German silver nickel copper zinc bridges, blued screws, jewels set in chaton, and you can see polished pegs and case clamp screws with a black polished swan's neck and a black polished cap to the escape wheel. It also features hacking seconds. It is adjusted in a chronometer style high horology 5 positions, and it features a simple and easy to adjust yellow gold pin buckle. Let's stick with yellow gold, but let's once again get ambitious. The hits keep coming on today's episode. You can't call this a Baselworld 2020 novelty, but this is the 2020 released Patek Philippe 5270J, the first 5270 perpetual calendar chronograph since the model's launch in 2011 to feature a traditional yellow gold case, silver satin dial, yellow gold hands, as well as yellow gold indices and frames for the date apertures. Take a quick look and you can see that the hands for the chronograph seconds and chronograph minutes are frosted yellow gold, and the case is of extraordinary character with a concave bezel profile, a bezel stepped in from the mid case, fluted and stepped lugs. It's a testament to how far Patek Philippe case making has come. The complexity of this case, both the assembly and the finishing, is self-evident in its contours and crevices. Now, turning it over, you can see this is where the fun starts. Well, you could argue that the fun starts with the dial, as we have world-class chronograph pusher feel and a perpetual calendar. You need not adjust it until the year 2100. Leap years, irregular length months, this calendar can keep up. But you turn it over and you realize that the caliber 29535 is an absolute gem. Fixing all of the deficiencies of the previous Lange caliber, it is both broader across and equipped with the much requested hacking or stop seconds function. 65-hour power reserve, a new higher beat rate of 28,800 vibrations per hour, 6-position adjustment, not 5, with a handmade Breguet overcoil, a ferrous metal Breguet overcoil, the better to allow it to keep even time without gaining or losing in any orientation. You can see it is still a lateral clutch column wheel chronograph, and in Geneva fashion, the column wheel has been black capped, but it is still the column wheel underneath that black polished cap. Beautiful Cote de Genève here, distinct from the Lange in that we have brass bridges and plates that are silver rhodium plated. There's engine turning on the base plate, and as I tilt I'll do my best to get this in the light, but as I tilt the watch at an angle, you can see that every edge of every steel chronograph component and every rhodium plated brass bridge lights up with broad mirrored ungulage of the highest grade. Even on the steel components of the chronograph, no expense is spared. There is not even one unfinished plane or unfinished edge to be seen. Even the screw heads feature black polished tops, chamfered slots, and chamfered circumference. You can see that there is an instantaneous minute jumper, so it is an instantaneous jumping minute, the little pawl and pawl wheel visible right next to my finger. And then, of course, everything here is deep. You can look at it diagonally, not just from the top. Repeat viewing rewards persistence, and it is absolutely worth buying a loop to enjoy this movement. 65-hour manual wind power reserve, column wheel, lateral clutch chronograph, perpetual calendar, 41 millimeters. Now, a very different take on Geneva watchmaking. This, of course, is the original Rolex Kermit, the 16610LV, but you can see it's also a relatively late example. None of these were ever built, save the prototypes, with perforated lugs, but not all of them were built with solid end-link bracelets, and this D-series watch has that. Now, the timepiece includes some elements that would later find their way into the standard Submariner. Folks noticed the green bezel that was introduced in 2003 with the so-called 50th anniversary Submariner, but a lot of folks don't notice that a Yachtmaster-style maxi dial was used with larger individual white gold plots and more lume. That was the other distinctive feature of this model. Caliber 3135, chronometer certified, 300 meters, water resistant. And though these watches are now becoming borderline vintage, because of the way they were built and they're still relatively recent construction in the grand scheme of things, you can still wear these watches as sports watches. You can still dive with them. You can still wear them every day and make them their daily drivers. Taking a quick look at the bracelet, you can see it is in outstanding condition. The Rolex crown remains razor sharp, as do the imprinted simulated links. And of course, this is a little bit of a transitional period in Submariner history, as the center links are hollow, but the end links are solid. The bezel as sharp as ever, a wonderfully refined to 10 and 120 clicks. Let's do a lume shot. As I said, these are still frontline sports watches, and while they are becoming borderline vintage and highly collectible, they are still able to function in their intended fashion. As they left Geneva, so they remain. That said, I've always had a soft spot for the Rolex Day Date. Partly because it was one of the few Rolex complications traditionally, and partly because it was always positioned as the flagship of the line. The watch had an aura and a mystique to me that always intrigued, in spite of its 36mm traditional size, and no day date ever captured my heart or imagination like the Tridor. Introduced in the 18039 generation, and we are saying 039 because these are considered to be white gold day dates. It's a timepiece that literally fuses all three golds. This is the 18039 BIC, and you have the three golds in the center link. This isn't like the modern Tridor where different metals are just bolted together. They are fused. You can see white at center, flanked by yellow, flanked by rose, and what is fundamentally a single quickset white gold 36mm day date. You could see how sharp these case lines are. Oftentimes, watches from this era, and this era is roughly 1985, watches from this era, if they haven't been refinished, are dinged, dented, and worn from use. This one, including the faceted bezel, is as sharp as the day it left Switzerland and extraordinary, with a rose satin sunburst dial and individual diamond indices. It has open sixes and open nines, and as you'll note, both original tritium hands and tritium dial base with that handsome salmon sunburst. Absolutely radiant and exceptional. The condition of this President bracelet is among the finest I've ever experienced for a watch from the mid-1980s from the Rolex manufacturer. The timepiece, 100 meters, water resistant, sapphire crystal, and a certified chronometer, can be worn like a modern watch. However, this is a vintage Rolex timepiece, and when speaking of vintage options among Rolex watches, we really need to start talking of the 80s the way we speak of the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, and even the 70s. These watches are now as old as I am, and while I hate to admit it, that means these need to be discussed alongside the likes of conventional and traditional Rolex vintage references. This 18039 white gold Tridor, or BIC, truly exceptional, both in its rarity and in its condition. That's the flagship of Rolex, circa 1985. Now let's take a detour through the world of Omega and a nod to the original 1957 Seamaster 300 CK2913. This is part of the Trilogy collection, the Railmaster, the Speedmaster, and the Seamaster. They came out in 2017, so there are 3,557 of these, and in every regard, it's a throwback to that original Omega professional diving watch. There were Seamasters before, dating back to 1948, but this was the first diving Seamaster, and as this model, 39mm in stainless steel, is of modern construction but historic style. You can wear it with abandon. What appears at first glance to be a plexiglass crystal, you see that little Omega, that's actually engraved on the underside with a laser. It is a sapphire crystal. The watch features a true-to-history bidirectional rotating bezel, a little bit of fauxtina, which in a watch like this actually is in keeping with the character. The timepiece, robustly water-resistant, or to use the antiquated term, lavished on the caseback, waterproof. It was part of a triplicate of watches. 60th anniversary for all three, the Railmaster, the Seamaster, and of course the Speedmaster. If you're wondering why there has been traditionally a seahorse on the back of the Speedmaster, it's because they were all launched as part of the Seamaster water-resistant watch collection back in '57. Now the timepiece is fully swimmable, though because of the bidirectional rotating bezel, it's not precisely a dive watch by modern standards, but it does have a 55-hour master chronometer movement. It is a it is COSC standard, but it goes a little bit beyond that as the movement is METAS standard. 55-hour power reserve, coaxial escapement. It meets the ISO 3159 standards that underpin the COSC, but it does so as a fully cased up watch. It has an anti-magnetic silicone hairspring. And we'll take a quick look at some of the details of this watch. It's a bit of a throwback, as there's really minimal beveling on the lugs. They're squared off at their end. The mid case is thin. We have no crown guard. We have that lovely Omega Naiad style crown, triple spoke center. We have a vintage Omega logo here, and here, and here, and a little modern touch internally is a 9.6 millimeter incremental push button slider. You also note the bracelet's built better than it ever would have been in the 50s, as there are many individual removable links, so you're gonna get the right size. The timepiece is minimalist, and with the quarter Arabic numerals, the matte black dial, and the simulated patina, it is a vintage looking watch that actually requires no apologies. We're gonna do a quick loom shot here, because this is still a sports watch. And you can see that patina style loom, ecru, isn't quite as bright as conventional, but it is darn close. And while I wouldn't use this bezel strictly as rescue gear or even a backup to your primary dive timer, it is still very easy to orient the bezel pearl with the minute hand for a quick timing device. So we've seen Fotina. Now it's time to talk about the real thing. 39 millimeters in stainless steel, pre-1997. This is the Speedmaster triple calendar, a timepiece 39 millimeters in diameter with a true tritium dial. 1997 was the changeover year for Omega. Before that, tritium. After that, luminova, with a little bit of a transition built into the model year. And you can see that this is great tritium patina. You've got a wonderful even fade from index to index with none of the dial degradation that often comes with such a darkening of the loom. Oftentimes there's water intrusion, physical contact with the dial, fading, oxidation. None of that here. The hands are service replacements in Luminova, so there's no doubt that the hands were replaced at some point during the service process. But the dial is where the value is, and this timepiece is extraordinarily intact, as it's been minimally refinished. You can see the condition is excellent from corner to corner, and you'll also appreciate the fact that the bracelet retains a lot of its integrity. It's an older Omega bracelet, which means pins and sleeves for sizing, but if you have a punch and a block, you'll be able to size this at home. Simple. As you can see, solid case back. Once again, the Speedmaster with that seahorse. Again, that's because in the beginning, the Speedmaster was part of the Seamaster line. The dial, of course, is a triple calendar. There is a radial date. It's hiding under the minute hand right now. We'll bring that out so we can see it more easily. And you will note that there is a quick set that allows you to rapidly cycle that radial date. You'll also appreciate, we'll move that minute hand just a little bit, that we have a triple calendar. We have the day, we have the month, we have the date, and then we have an interesting 24-hour dial that is often mistaken for a second time zone or a 24-hour register of the chronograph. In fact, that is simply an AM/PM indicator for the time at center, which is great if you're working in an environment where there may not be natural light and you need some distinction of day and night. Of course, also being an automatic winding chronograph, that is an awful lot. You've got your 24-hour dial, you've got your chronograph, your automatic winding, your triple calendar, your tritium dial, and the timepiece does feature a sapphire crystal. So while oftentimes people think Speedmaster reduced from this era, it must be a plexiglass. No, in fact, this model was considered to be something of a flagship and a value leader, and I must say one of the most complicated Omegas you could buy in the mid-90s. It did feature that sapphire crystal, which makes it more suitable for daily use. So this is a timepiece that's a lot of fun, looks great on the wrist. It's a great option if you think for whatever reason the traditional moon watch is either too common or too large, and certainly with this intact tritium dial and case and bracelet in outstanding condition, this is a watch to keep for the future. Not because it's going to make you rich or gain a lot of value, just because it's always going to be interesting to collectors. And around watch guys, a timepiece with a dial like this cannot help but strike up a conversation. Okay, let's talk about two brands from Geneva, starting with FP Journe. Here is a solid gold dial, hand engraved from FP Journe in the signature Tourbillon Souverain model. So platinum case, 40 millimeters, red gold dial, and you can see that it is incredibly intricate. A lot of FP Journe watches are known for being reasonably priced because the movement finishing is a mixture of manual and mechanical. And for a lot of folks who are deeply invested in high horology, both the watches, but also the idea. That much mechanical finishing on an haute de gamme watch doesn't always sit right. Well, this is the solution. The engraved dials are always built in small runs, generally a dozen or less per year, and the combination of the red gold with the handcraft makes up whatever the movements lack in outright hand finish. Now that's even better because you've got the hand-finished dial, and then the tourbillon goes a little bit beyond, say, a chronomètre souverain or a chronomètre bleu in its use of hand finishing, as the entire tourbillon carriage, as well as the black polished and rounded half bridge for the tourbillon carriage, this is all manually executed. This is high-end haute de gamme finishing. This is where the machine essentially gets parked, as you have this lovely wire-style filigree tourbillon carriage, the black polished cock for the tourbillon cage, and then you've got a free-sprung balance. You can see the variable inertia nuts. That's how all regulation is done, and a rare for FP Journe overcoil hairspring. You can just barely see the overcoil structure, but that ensures that regardless of what the tourbillon does for the timing and precision of the watch, no matter what position it's in, the overcoil beats concentrically. Its mass is centered, and it helps the watch to keep outstanding time, even if, strictly speaking, the tourbillon is a precision instrument designed for pocket watches. Now, we also have a deadbeat second system, and we have a power reserve, and keep in mind, this is a chronometer style, marine chronometer style power reserve, so as you wind it, it traverses from 42 to 0. Just remember, it moves backwards. The deadbeat system is actually more than meets the eye, as there is the linear titanium spring, the remontoire d'égalité, essentially a small power reserve with 1 second worth of energy that transmits the power from the barrel to the escapement. Because the barrel never directly drives the escapement, it can't run fast, it can't run slow. In terms of amplitude loss or gain, there is none, regardless of the state of wind of the watch over approximately its first 28 hours of operation. Now, after 30 hours elapsed on the power reserve, this will revert to sweep seconds. So to keep the remontoire constant force device and the constant amplitude in play, you want to wind this watch at the same time every day. And it's that combination of the overcoil, the 6-position adjustment, the tourbillon, and the remontoire all working in concert that assures this watch is not just beautiful, but truly reclaims the chronometric purpose of the original Breguet tourbillon. The bridges, as you can see, are rose gold, bridges and plates, being a gold dial with a gold movement in a platinum case. This watch is exceptionally heavy. It is a massive thing. It feels like a hunk of quality, and make no mistake, even without this exceptional Jean Rousseau Parisian hand-cut strap, it's a watch that has a huge visual signature, as a large tourbillon with a rose gold dial from a super premium brand is always going to draw a lot of attention. The Journe brand, however, isn't terribly expansive in terms of production, as even in a flush year, the company's only going to make about 950 watches, and since 1999, you get a sense, given Rolex's production of nearly 1 million watches a year, just how scarce FP Journe timepieces truly are. Okay, a more traditional player in Geneva high horology, we've discussed them once on the show, but this is the watch I would pick of the two Pateks shown. This is, of course, the 5170P, launched in 2017, built for 3 model years. It's 39.4 millimeters in platinum, and it was the first platinum 5170. Now, a couple of other features set this watch apart from the other 5170s. First, not all of them are loomed, and this one is. But second, it has a lovely blue gradient dial that fades from a sort of cobalt metallic blue at the center to dark navy, almost black at the edge. There's a tachymeter scale, white on black or blue, depending on the spot, printing, and then diamond indices used for the hours, which I find to be exquisite. I'm always sensitive to the presence of diamonds on a men's watch. Some applications I like, some I don't. I would say more often than not, I'm not a fan. Here, I absolutely adore it, as it's subtle and it's mature. The purpose here isn't to stand out as wealth. The purpose isn't to signal wealth. It's to please the owner and, frankly, improve legibility, as the crystal indices are easy to recognize against the bright base. Most people looking for diamonds on a watch are going to look at the bezel, the lugs, and the case, and then bolt. If they don't see it, they're not interested. This rewards repeat viewing, and the subtlety of the diamond use could easily be lost upon the casual observer. Of course, being a platinum Patek, there is also a brilliant cut top Vesselton diamond between the lugs down at 6 o'clock. And we have a version of the 29535 that we saw before on the 5270. Technically, it's the same specifications, right down to the hacking the column wheel, the lateral clutch, the instantaneous jumping minute, the overcoil, the 6-position adjustment, the 65-hour power reserve, and the 4 hertz beat rate. And you can really see that lush beveling on the edge of every component that has an edge. This is as good as it gets. And of course, it features a matching platinum buckle. This timepiece is also flat, being remarkably flush when fit to the wrist. Although it appears large in isolation on the wrist, you can see it really does have traditional and compact size. It's an absolute pleasure to wear. The heft, again, like the Journe, you feel like you're wearing something expensive, even though it isn't overtly large or garish. It's a timepiece of extraordinary subtlety, and with the combination of the lume, the gradient dial, the diamond indices, and the relative rarity of the only Platinum 5170 and only made for 3 model years, this is a standout and a personal favorite of mine amongst Patek's offerings of the last 10 years. Moser. I like to call it the German-Swiss FP Journe, both in terms of volume, as they cap their annual production around 1,500, and in terms of innovation and willingness to experiment. Let's talk about a more traditional Moser Cie Endeavour center seconds. Now you can see this watch, white gold, 40.8 millimeters in diameter, has that wonderfully sculpted Endeavour case in white gold, and you really can see the difference. I'll get as close as I can here. You really can see the difference between white gold and platinum. Platinum is much whiter. You're looking at the Patek on the top and the Moser on the bottom, but platinum is much whiter, which means that white gold is much warmer. We also have a signature fume or fade dial here. This is something Moser does better than anyone. There's a fade from a sort of silver metallic to almost a brown bronze and then black at the edge. It's the complexity. It's not simply silver to black. There's a sort of brown or bronze undertone through this dial that deeply intrigues and catches the eye. There's also a paucity of printing. Moser Cie, that's it. Swiss made. A timepiece that's elegant, graceful, and a manufactured product. As Moser of Schaffhausen, Switzerland, it's a neighbor of IWC. They have a small precision engineering subsidiary that even makes their hairsprings, their escapements, and their balance wheels. You can see that it's not broad across the wrist and the lugs are tightly downturned. It's a simple and easy to read watch with wonderfully polished and faceted indices that really pop against the dial base, and it is low on the wrist. The strap is kudu, and I don't know what to say other than that, besides the fact that I had to Google an image of that animal because I didn't know what it looked like. And there is a simple white gold pin buckle. Again, the case sculpting is gorgeous, and you can see they thought of everything. They left a little kerf underneath the crown so you can dig in your nail. As for the movement, it is gorgeous. Caliber 343. Technically a 7-day power reserve. In reality, it'll run for almost 7 before it truly dies. You can see, like the Lange, we have jewels, pivot jewels for the barrels set in screw-fixed chaton. Unlike the Lange, we use a lot of black polished screws here rather than blued. Full balance bridge with a free-sprung index for shock resistance. It beats away at 18K. There's a 14-karat solid gold escapement of Moser's own manufacture that helps to extend the power reserve and reduce parasitic losses. And then there's an overcoil hairspring of their proprietary anti-magnetic Strawman alloy. You'll also note a lovely pocket watch style swan's neck click spring and this lovely double crested Côte de Genève that is distinctive of the brand. That's something that they do that sets their movement finish apart. And like FP Journe, it is a combination of manual and mechanical finish. It's also remarkably subtle because you can see there's a case back power reserve that keeps the dial clean. There is stop seconds, so the watch has that significant refinement, something that FP Journe does not include on his watches. And of course the timepiece is adjusted in 6 positions, which to watch geeks is deeply cool because it gives deviation and inaccuracy no position in which to hide. A lot of watch brands will precisely adjust watches in 5 positions and they'll leave all the crap and the error in that 6th position. Not here. But if you want something more complicated, but just as technically ambitious, consider this Endeavour Funky Blue Perpetual Calendar. It is the Endeavour Perpetual Calendar Funky Blue Titanium DLC. Nominally the same case size. You can see this case shape's a little bit different as it features a drawn out and broadened bezel at the ends. You can see at 6 o'clock And 12 o'clock here, the bezel expands in a wonderful fluid form, and so too does the case back have a lovely sculpting. As you can see, the crystal on the reverse side is contoured to wrap around your wrist. It has the same lovely case hollows with both satination and polish, and in titanium, the watch feels almost weightless. It is a perpetual calendar. It has the same 7-day power reserve, the funky blue dial, and if you look carefully, there's a power reserve on the dial side, so all of the action here, with the exception of the leap year phase indicator, is on the dial side. So you have stop seconds. You also have a quick set that allows you to adjust the perpetual calendar forward or backwards. And you can see that the index at the center aligns with the 12 hours to represent the 12 months of the year. And you have this ability to adjust forward or backwards. Keep in mind that the quick set system works differently than the calendar when it's turning itself over under its own power. So don't be deceived. It's going to work differently when you're using the quick set system. Rolling over to the next month, you can see how, once again, I'm able to move in either direction. And the system is very user-friendly. It was originally developed by Andreas Streller, an AHCI luminary and genius in simplifying complications. Now, the funky blue dial is a big part of the appeal. It is fumé, like we just saw on that previous Endeavour, but it's a different fade, from a lighter metallic blue to almost black or navy at its edge. The timepiece includes a caliber that is functionally identical to the one we just saw, a little bit different in architecture because of the addition of the perpetual calendar system. And of course, you have the hidden leap year indicator on the back. So this is a very simple, user-friendly perpetual calendar jointly with Ulysse Nardin, probably the friendliest, most usable perpetual calendar system on the market. Still free sprung, overcoil, full balance bridge, solid gold escapement, and a feature that's distinctive of Moser's, the whole escapement and balance assembly is on a separate platform that lifts out as a unit, so it can be replaced with a pre-serviced unit when it goes back for service at the factory to speed up the process of returning your Moser to you. And I should also mention, this watch is part of a limited edition of 10 pieces made back in 2016, so it is extraordinarily rare. The most sought Moser watches generally are those in titanium. They're among the scarcest that are produced and the most versatile, durable, wearable, and fun. This is a dress watch, yes, but it is a very, very sporty dress watch, and one that would be at home almost anywhere. It has that same 7-day power reserve that'll run for almost 10, and it's an absolute show stealer. This watch is going to be the life of the party on any wrist, heck, even mine. We're not quite done with Moser, though, because one of the drawbacks of FP Journe, as I've often cited, is the lack of watches that are truly swimmable. Well, with the Pioneer Center Second, you don't have that problem. Now here, we have an extraordinary green fumé dial, but it doesn't fade quite as much by the edge. It does darken, but not to black, giving this watch a much more colorful appearance. Now, the Pioneer is the sports watch in the lineup. You can see instead of the sculpted case hollows of a traditional Moser, like, for example, the Endeavours or the Venturers, it's relieved and then with a light coining, it has a distinctive and more mechanical, more industrial look. Screw-down crown, 120-meter water resistance. This is a real swimmable watch. It's also fully loomed and minimally signed, as it says Moser Cie on the dial. It doesn't even mention Swiss manufacturer. It's a given with this company. HMC 200 movement, bidirectional winding. It uses a magic lever-style bidirectional system. Very, very tough. Balance beats away at 21.6. Again, like the Endeavours, it's their own fabrication, their own balance, their own escapement, their own hairspring, produced through precision engineering. And there is a hacking system, so you can actually lock up the balance and set this watch with its center seconds to the second against a reference time. It's automatic winding with a 3-day power reserve, so if you want to put it down for a day or two and rotate through your collection, it's not going to stop in progress. Throw it on the wrist at 42.8 millimeters. It's a large watch, but it's really not that thick, as a large part of the thickness comes in the dome-like bubble of the sapphire. So this is a watch with a lot to recommend it. Let's do a loom shot, because this is an absolute firefly by night. As you can see, no shortage of loom on the Pioneer Center Second. Easy to read, double index up at 12 o'clock, a timepiece that you could probably put on and never take off, and that is the ultimate mark of a fine sports watch. But I will mention that today, in this case, Moser is a bit outgunned. This is only the second of the de Bethune DB28 GS Grand Bleu dive style watches that we've had. The first one was gone almost immediately, and you can see why. Launched for 2019, this 44mm grade 5 titanium watch was de Bethune's most aggressive ever sports offering. Their first sporting center second. It also features a rotating dive style bezel that you can immediately line up with the minute or the hour hand, both of which use Black Badger's AGT Ultra solid lume material. Triple shock protection, 1, 2, 3 for the balance. The watch features hand beveled and deeply engraved bridges for the barrels, a power reserve indicator for the 5-day power reserve manual wind over at 9 o'clock, and then an extraordinary LED lume system that uses a minute repeater style centrifugal governor to slow down the flow of power from the barrels to the dynamo into the LEDs. All of this 105 meters water resistant and feather light in titanium with spring-loaded floating lugs, so it's guaranteed to fit. Traditional craft finish, yes. Rarity, they make 150 watches a year, guaranteed. Ergonomics, outstanding. And it's only 12.9 millimeters thick and feather light on the wrist. Reading it becomes second nature after a few minutes. And at night, with the lights off, it cannot be missed. Let me demonstrate. As you can see, the watch does have lume, but heck, forget that. This is the Lamborghini of diving watches. Remember, tmosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details of this or any watch you see here on the channel. Time out, Tim out, and thanks for logging on.